Welcome to She Makes It Work with Gabby and Abi. Today we're talking about the 7 mistakes at work that are holding you back.
I love this topic. And we came up with this one because we have seen people do this. We've seen ourselves do this over the years. And so we thought it would be so helpful to aggregate this list and talk about it. When I say I see people doing these things, I mean almost everybody is making one of these mistakes at work. If that's you, don't feel bad about it, but definitely listen with an open mind as we jump into these 7 things you could be doing because you may not be doing all of them. You might be, but you're certainly probably doing at least one of them. And as we talk about them, I am going to give you a little bit of kind of work to do while we're talking, which is if you find yourself feeling a certain type of way as we talk about each one of these things or any of these things, that probably means it's for you. And that's a little bit of a challenging thought to some folks. But again, if you have a reaction or if you're feeling a type of way, that's really a sign to just pause and listen deeply and think about it and maybe do some work offline and dig deeper on that one because it's a sign that maybe this one applies to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about that you might be doing is not holding yourself accountable. I think this is a huge one. I see a lack of accountability all the time.
Okay, so what is accountability? What do you mean by that?
I think accountability is recognizing that you've had a miss on something and being able to acknowledge it and hold yourself responsible. That can include apologizing, and it definitely should include changing what you're doing and
Like owning your mistake.
owning your mistake. Like you've done something and it's usually impacting someone else. I think that's where it's especially noticeable to me is you've done something and it's impacting other people. And so there's holding yourself accountable to you. And then when it comes to work, I also think it's equally or more important to hold yourself accountable to the people that you're affecting with the thing
Mm.
that you did.
No, that's a good call out. I think that builds trust.
Definitely builds trust. But as we're talking about it, I'm also thinking about the work we do independently. And while holding yourself accountable to your team, I think is so important because it's a philosophical belief of mine that you shouldn't negatively be impacting the people around you. When you are in business for yourself, or let's say you're a freelancer or an entrepreneur, you have less of those external indicators of accountability. So I'd say it's almost even more important in some ways and even harder to hold yourself accountable when it's just you, when you're holding yourself accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that's a way that we're holding ourselves back. How can that show up?
I think it can show up in so many ways, but I think when you keyed in on the trust thing, let's talk about that really quick. Because if you're in a team environment, let's say you're working with a team, let's say you're working with a client and you've missed a deadline.
Mm.
And so if you've missed that deadline, your client's trust in your delivery is eroded. Your team's trust in your delivery is eroded. They start to feel like they can't rely on you. But if you recognize that you've missed a deadline, for example, and you hold yourself accountable and you'll say, I told you I would have that on Wednesday and it's Friday and I haven't delivered it. I'm genuinely sorry. I will not do that again. And I'm going to remedy it by whatever it is that you're going to do. Honestly, to me, accountability means you're willing to go the extra mile to fix the mistake that you made, which doesn't just mean not doing it again, but it also means they still need the thing. They still need the
Mm.
thing that you're late on. So you should probably do that. So I'd say that the impact where it holds you back is your team, your client, your boss, whoever you're accountable to in that situation is really getting the feeling that they can't rely on you. And if they can't rely on you, they're not
For,
going to give you more to do.
for sure.
They're not going to give you more responsibilities. They're not going to give you more opportunities,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And I think an extension of holding yourself accountable is knowing before you miss the deadline that you're at risk of missing the deadline and communicating that proactively.
That's even better. That is
That's
even better, as I like to say at work.
better.
Yeah, that
That's
is
the
even
better thing to do.
better. Yes. It's definitely telling somebody, hey, I thought I would have this done by Wednesday. And, you know, it's Monday and I'm not on track. I'm not on track to finish it by Wednesday. That gives the other person an opportunity to participate in problem solving with you in terms of reprioritizing, getting things off your plate, or it just fundamentally takes that long. They can then reset expectations with other people. They're part of the solution with you, they're actually more invested in helping you succeed.
Ah, then it's you and me versus a problem, not you versus
That's
me
exactly right.
after the deadline. And it's like, oh, well, you didn't do this. And then it becomes a he said, she said, or,
Mhm.
pointing fingers, and none of that's productive.
None of that's productive. And I'll give you an example of where it's gone wrong. I had it was a very small project at the time, which is not my normal bag. As we know, I kind of specialize in super large enterprise projects. And I have to admit, I was being a little more chill about the project because it was so small and we had plenty of time. Well, we had a developer on the project, and he was working with a new technology at the time that he wasn't used to. And it turns out that technology wasn't that proven. And so it was taking him longer and longer to do the thing, even though we had plenty of time. And we had timelines and we had sprints. And so I would start telling him, we're a little late on this. I know that you're problem solving. What do you think we're going to do? And he kept getting frustrated with me about trying to hold him accountable to the timeline.
Mm.
And it was really interesting because at the end of the project, we did a retro and it turned out all of these things. He wasn't used to having deadlines on client projects. That was new for him. But it was really interesting because the thing he said to me was, I should have printed out the schedule for him and put it on his desk. So
Oh,
even in the retro, so even after we'd gone through all this stuff, he still was not holding himself accountable.
yeah, that's, mm,
Do you think I ever staffed him on a project again?
no.
No, I did not.
Yeah, exactly. And so not only what other ways do people not hold themselves accountable? Okay, deadlines, sure. I've managed my deadlines, but what are there other ways that people don't hold themselves accountable?
Well, deadlines is one of my favorite ones because it happens so much and it's so obvious. I say quality. I think people don't hold themselves accountable enough for the quality of their work.
Mm.
And when I say the quality of their work, what I mean is, let's say someone's asked you to do a PowerPoint presentation and you just slap some things on a slide and it's probably late or close to late and you haven't really paid attention to, does the slide convey the information or is it accurate? Did you, do the analysis that was needed for the numbers? Did you make sure it's attractive and digestible? That's an easy quality example. Another quality example is obviously technical work. But what happens is that I do observe people at work who produce something and then they seem to get a little bit resentful when there's feedback or when there's iterations on quality. And my perspective is you've got ownership of whatever that deliverable is, whatever it is that the work you're trying to do, you've got ownership of that. And showing that ownership is putting the work in on quality. And if you have a quality miss, what we want to see as leaders is we want to see people holding themselves accountable for that quality and acknowledging this isn't the kind of work that I'd like to be delivering and I'm going to improve my presentation skills so I can have better quality and just really acknowledging that there was maybe a miss in the quality of the work and committing to what they're going to do to improve it next time. And when I don't see people doing that, it just really conveys to me that either I feel like they don't care about quality,
Mm.
they don't care about the end result, they don't care to improve themselves. Like if I see people doing this repeatedly,
Yeah.
those are not the people that I'm going to invest in lifting up their careers and in
Mm.
coaching them and in, again, advancing them for promotion or giving them better projects and assignments because it doesn't look like they care about that.
Yeah, the opportunity cost,
Hmm.
not holding yourself
For
accountable on
them.
quality.
And I'll
Yeah.
give them that feedback, but really, I think it's that mindset,
Yeah.
to use one of your favorite words, it's that mindset of, hey, I want to see that they have that mindset that not only is quality important, but that they're willing to invest the time in constantly improving the quality of their work. And I do think that, especially if you are an entrepreneur or a freelancer, or somebody who works more independently, your quality is your brand in some
Mm.
cases. And
Sure
so
is.
I think that's where, again, the self accountability is really important to be able to measure what's the quality of the work, how am I improving it, how am I demonstrating that I care about a quality product.
Yeah, I think the mindset that goes into that so that you can prevent it from happening before it happens is look at the work with the lens of whoever is going to be approving it or looking at it. And I saw this in C-suite meetings when at my last position. where somebody would present something and there was a number on the screen, and the CEO would ask about that number and they could not delve into that number.
They
And
couldn't
that
justify
drove
it.
leadership
Mhm.
crazy. Like, okay, you're telling me it's this percent, but you don't even know the math behind it. You didn't show your work. You don't know where that number came from. So if you're giving me information that you can't back up, that's a quality issue because you don't know if that's right. And
Mhm.
there were some heated conversations around things like that. So something that, don't present information that you don't completely
That you can't
trust,
stand
that you can't stand
behind, that you can't
behind.
justify. Yes.
Mhm.
That you can't defend.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. And that does happen where, I'll have a team member or somebody presenting something to me and I'll be asking them, what research did you do on that? How did you validate that? Where did that come from? And if they're not able to answer that, then that does make me question the reliability of the information that they're giving me. And then I can't use that. I can't take that forward. I can't take that to my client or to my executive leader.
Yeah.
Like,
And to flip that on its head in a positive direction, when you're putting your presentation together, think about the questions leadership might ask you. And what are they really trying to get to with this information? Understanding where that's going can help set you ahead of everyone else when you're doing these things and having that mindset of what kind of questions are they going to ask me about this information and trying to answer those before they even can ask them. Answer it
mm-hmm,
with your data, with your presentation, with your work before they even have to. And for me, when someone does that, I'm like, you're you're on the right track. You're thinking in the vein I need you to be thinking. And for me, when that's happened, that makes me trust the person more and want to rely on them more.
mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that's a great segue into our next one.
Being defensive about
Ooh,
feedback.
this guy.
Oh my gosh, this is a huge one because I see it all the time. And I've experienced it too. I'm not gonna lie. I've gotten feedback where my gut reaction is just a visceral no. That happens to all of us.
Absolutely.
It does happen to all of us. It is a little harder sometimes when you're on the other side of the table and you're the one giving feedback because you've put a lot of thought into the feedback and you're really intending to try and help somebody with something that they're struggling with, whether or not they know it. And then they've got
Mm,
this reaction.
yeah. So as a manager, what comes up for you when someone's defensive about feedback?
When they're defensive about feedback, it tells me that they're either not committed to growth or they're not ready for growth. And that is where the holding you back comes from, is that again translates into you need more time at your level to work through this.
Mm,
You may be at the wrong level, which is not a thought anybody wants to have, but happens sometimes. And it tells me that I might be more committed to your development than you are. And that's tough as a leader.
an uphill battle.
Yeah, that is tough because you want to invest in your people. And even though I don't always come across as the most empathetic person, I genuinely care and I put my time into that thought and effort to help coach and develop people. And when it doesn't land well, then I know that they're telling themselves some sort of story, right? They're
Mhm.
telling themselves a story about me or they're telling themselves a story about themselves. But to me, when you have that moment where you feel that defensiveness, to me, that's a sign that you need to dig in, that it is triggering you in some way, and that you now have an opportunity to explore and discover about that trigger and discover about yourself. And whenever I've felt defensive, because again, I've been on that side where I've felt defensive, it's usually been something where I'm hiding from myself about something.
Mm.
Or sometimes it's I've intentionally chosen not to deal with that thing. So I'm not hiding from it. I'm aware of it, but I might be tired of hearing it. Sometimes I'll get feedback where I'm just like, noted. This is not the time for me to work on that.
Okay, so if you notice as, you're getting feedback that you're defensive about it, how can you how can you hold that and still show up professionally such that it doesn't hold you back?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love that. When you're in the moment and someone's giving you feedback and you just have this reaction inside, Again, it's so important not to show it unprofessionally. I love that you went back to that, but I think it's really up to the nature of your relationship with the person who's giving you feedback and your own self-awareness. Because sometimes in the moment you have an emotional reaction and you don't yet know where it's coming from. It is okay to say to the person giving you feedback, I find that this is a challenging thought for me, and I need to sit with this a little bit, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask you some more about this feedback. I think I need to take this away and process this a little bit and come back. And then please make sure you come back, because I have had people say that and not come back. But
Mm,
if you're finding that you're getting emotional for some reason, and emotional is not a bad word, it is just a sign of something. But if you
mm,
find that you're having any sort of emotional reaction, defensiveness, anger, you might want to cry and you don't know why. I don't know how many times that's happened where someone's telling me something and I want to cry and I don't even know where it's coming from. Just tell the person, this is great feedback, but I need to process it. And then I want to come back and really have a deep conversation with you about it if you're open to that. And then the person knows you care and they know that you want to put the work in.
yeah.
So I'd say that's one really good way to handle it. Another good way to handle it is if you know why you're having that reaction, it's okay to share that. And I'm going to give an example of someone who I had been coaching, and I think they were oversaturated with feedback. And so they just couldn't take any more feedback.
Interesting.
That happens, right? Like,
Yeah.
just, hey, you're at a certain point in your career and you're working on like a bunch of new skills. You're in a stretch hole. You're already overwhelmed by what you're trying to do. I think it's okay to say, this is good feedback. I can't actually process this feedback right now because I'm a little bit overwhelmed by everything that's going on. So, can we put a pin in this and come back? I think that is very admirable because it shows self awareness about where you are, and you're still taking ownership of yourself
Yeah.
and how you're reacting to the feedback. And again, I have seen this happen where people just aren't at a place where they can handle the feedback, whether it's something going on in their personal lives or they know they're not being their best self on the project for both personal and professional reasons. But just own your reaction, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then the third thing is, if you are even more self-aware and also able to process it in the moment, I think it's really powerful where someone says, I recognize that I am having a reaction to this feedback you're giving me. And just be open and not confrontational, but conversational about it, and say, I really appreciate the feedback, and I recognize in this moment I'm actually feeling a little defensive. So I need to process this a little bit with you offline, and just be open. Just be
Yeah.
open. Tell them, because it's so much better to explain to someone what's going on in your head than leave them guessing. Because if you let someone guess what's going on in your head, they are not going to come to the conclusion that you want them to.
Right. We make up our own stories with our information. So giving
Mhm.
information clarity is kindness. So being
Mhm.
clear about where you are stops other people from filling in the gaps.
That is so true. And it's so important to know that in certain contexts, people will come to pretty consistent conclusions. So if you're stonewalling when you're getting feedback, most people will think they are not open to this feedback.
Mm.
That's the takeaway. And
Mm-hmm.
not, maybe even not extrapolate as to the why, but just they're not open to this feedback if someone's stonewalling. Or if they get defensive and reactive, like visually or verbally defensive and reactive, same thing. Not open to this feedback, not good. You might get rolled off your project.
Mm. So as a manager that has someone that is defensive, how do you work through that as well, besides just giving up, obviously?
Yeah, obviously nobody would do that. When I am really invested in someone's career, and if they report to me, for example, then I'll take a moment and step away, because nobody likes it when somebody else is reacting defensively. Like, we have our own reactions, it's human, but as leaders, we can't show that, obviously. So I step away and I ask myself, is this the time for them? Like, do they need some space with this, or do they need another conversation with this?
Mm.
And so, there's this expression that feedback has a shelf life. And I agree with that, but I also agree that there's a time and a place. And if you as a manager know that your person is struggling with something personally, and that maybe that wasn't the time to have given them that feedback, it's okay to come back and say, Charlie, I tried to have this conversation with you, and I recognize now that maybe you're not in a place where that was the right conversation for you, and hold yourself accountable and say, I'd love to work with you on developing this skill, but you let me know when it's the time for you. Like, that is a very giving someone grace and a kind way to approach it if you know they have something else going on. If you are not aware, they haven't shared it with you, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people aren't, unfortunately, as open
Mhm.
about sharing that they have other things going on. It's okay to just let it breathe a little bit and then come back and say, I would love to help you develop these skills or come up to this level. I'm feeling like when I try to give you feedback, it isn't as productive as a conversation as I'd like. What can we do with that? And put
Mm.
that in the other person's hands. Let them know that that's how you're feeling. Because again, speaking to somebody, you, audience, may be the defensive person. You may not know that that's how it looks to the other person.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so
Yeah.
giving them an opportunity to understand this is what it looks like to me, but then also giving that power back to them. What do you want to do with that? Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. And I know you said it's holding us back, but can you articulate some of the ways of missed opportunities and things that of can you articulate some of the ways that this might hold you back being defensive about feedback?
Yes, because there are so many. So if I had concluded, for example, whether you told me or I just assumed it, and maybe it was a wrong assumption on my part, but if you don't give me the information, I don't know, that you were overwhelmed. Well, if I think you're overwhelmed, am I going to give you more opportunities? No, I'm going to think you're not ready for those opportunities.
Mm.
And if there's a new project that's coming up and you're finishing your project, and this one is more of a stretch role but has higher rewards, that is not a project I'm going to ask you to do because I'm thinking that you're overwhelmed and that isn't the right time for you to be doing something that's that much of a stretch. Or if you even shared with me, I can't take this feedback because I can't stretch right now. Well, of course, you're not going to get a stretch role, but that also translates to promotion opportunities.
Mm.
And so I think that when you look at where am I stuck in my career, and this is part of where some of this came from, this concept of what's holding you back is you might be in a position where you're asking yourself, why am I not moving forward? I'm
Mm.
working so hard. Why am I not moving forward? What's holding me back? That's really where the genesis of this came from.
Wow, it's really interesting that we don't I earlier in at earlier points in my career, there's so much left unsaid. And we always think I would in the past would think that, oh, we didn't talk about it, so it's not it is how it is, right? And the assumptions baked into that is only what we've actually talked about and not what we haven't talked about. There's so much in the what we haven't talked about. So it seems like the more you talk about it, the less assumptions that are made, things that are clearer. And yeah,
I think it's interesting because I think that when you're on that side, you don't know the repercussions of
right.
what happened. And so to you, there was one conversation, you were defensive, it's one and done.
Mhm.
And to the leaders around you, that's now a story about you. And so I think it's so important to control your own story.
Mm.
And one of the ways you can do that is by creating a new narrative by having a different interaction. And so I know that that's a little like deeper than the topic itself, but I think it's really important to understand that that is why it is holding you back is to you this was just some wacky feedback you got that didn't land well and that you were defensive about and you just think I was having a bad day and they're going to know I was having a bad day. That isn't the takeaway.
Mm. That's really powerful.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Abby. And
Thank
thank you
you.
so much to our audience for joining us today for She Makes It Work. And if you like this episode, please like and subscribe for more. And if you want us to go deeper on any of these topics and you happen to be a YouTube viewer, please leave a comment because we would love to know which of these things you'd like to hear more about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay,
Okay,
bye.
bye.